Hey everybody, it's Mike again from Daily Living with Water and All Things Water Treatment Academy. And I'm in my office actually performing this for you to explain this final bonus material, which is the microbiological water testing. I saved the best for last, and I really hope that you benefit from it because I'm going to be sharing some things with you that I haven't been able to find anybody of authority to speak on this subject matter to this point. I think you're worth it. I care about you. I care about those that are in your care, and that's why I want to share this information with you. So let's go ahead and begin. I'll be reading my points from these slides that I put together for this presentation for you, so please don't think I'm ignoring you. It helps me to keep on point. All right, so let's begin. What we're going to be covering in this video today is the best practices for microbiological water testing. You're going to discover why you need to test for the presence of microbiologics in your water. Next, you're going to learn about the only two scenarios that you really need to test for bacteria in your water at home or at the business location. You're going to discover the different methods of testing bacteria, and there's only three, but I want you to be prepared for them to find the best testing solution for your situation, whether it be in-home or if you decide on doing a mail-in for water testing to a state licensed water testing lab facility. I'm also going to be covering what's not included in an HPC test, and I'll explain what HPC means as we go. And then finally, you're going to be looking for reference links after this video to further information online and where to also source for a small amount of test kits, particularly if you don't want to buy test kits by the case because you're never going to use them in time before they expire. And then also I'll be giving you some video links that have been provided for years by other select companies, but these are curated, which means that I have filtered out the noise and I have verified that these are the types of videos that I would produce if I could produce them to help further explain to you exactly what you should be looking for in combating the bacterial side of the equation in terms of layering the protection systems in your water. So first off, we always like to start with why. If you're a Simon Sinek fan like I am, always begin with why. You need to know why that you're testing for bacteria in your water supply. So let's discover that. First off, you can't see the germs in the water. Secondly, there's a different treatment for water besides the following for controlling bacteria. So everything that I'm about to read to you does not do a sufficient job in combating. So I want to just dispel those myths right away. Those include water softeners, water conditioners, reverse osmosis, pitcher water filters and straw water filters, faucet filters, refrigerator water dispensers, and if they have them, the ice makers, 5-gallon water coolers or water dispensers for both hot and cold or room temperature water. These are not the most effective against germs in your water supply. So that leads us to what does actually work. Well, only a smart controlled EPA registered Class A and in some cases Class B UV water disinfection treatment systems, which kill over 99% of the germs in water. You'll want to be able to verify your assumptions, not just take carte blanche for granted that because you put in a water treatment system that disinfects as its role, that it's actually working. You need to test, as I've mentioned before, to verify your assumptions is this system actually working? And if it isn't, that's when you need to begin to troubleshoot and find out why. But we recommend that you do that, at least the testing, anywhere from 2 to 4 times a year. If you have somebody that is significantly suffering from a compromised immune system, you're going to want to test more frequently than just once or twice a year. So I would say a good way to do that is to test on a quarterly basis. So you can pretty much think in terms of quantity when you order a bacteria water test for in-home or in-business locations, anywhere from 2 to 4 times a year. I wouldn't go beyond that year, and I'll show you why. You also want to be a benefit to those that either suffer from a compromised immune system, or you're just trying to bolster existing healthy immune system and not bring it down by exhausting it by a daily onslaught of bacteria that it has to fight against to keep you from getting sick. That would be living with water for drinking and or bathing, showering, hand washing, the dental care, oral care, steaming, vaporizing, diffusing, and or humidifying water sources. We do this so that it'll provide the daily peace of mind and increased quality of life for the people, especially that suffer from a compromised immune system. Now, there's only 2 scenarios that you will test for in your home or business location for bacteria. And you can see that we're showing a scenario of a bathroom, which is what I believe is probably the most dangerous area for being susceptible to bacteria. What you need to consider is determine if you have a point of use or point of entry access for water, for drinking, for food prep and cooking, etc. you would have in the kitchen. But an overlooked area, as I mentioned, is the bathroom itself for many people in terms of bacteria. Also, you need to determine if you have a point of entry system where it's installed, such as a whole house water filtration and disinfection treatments. As you've heard me speak time and time again throughout this series, I believe in a layered approach to protecting you and bringing out the best water so that it is not just acceptable, but it's exceptional because it's enhanced water. And if you are one of my students, you will understand the concept of water treatment defense in this manner. One thing that you have to keep in mind when you're testing your water is it's really not designed for in untreated tap water. So for you to test for colony-forming units or CFUs of bacteria, if it's greater than 300 colony-forming units or CFUs, particularly because of the unpleasant odor-causing bacteria, which is caused by the presence of biofilm somewhere being stagnant in your water, whether it be in your plumbing or storage containers, it really becomes a waste of money. Because if you remember back, I've mentioned before that the EPA, according to their Safe Drinking Water Act, that you should have anywhere from 500 or less CFUs of bacteria per milliliter in water. So if it's above what I'm about to show you, it could potentially overwhelm the test and you'll think that you failed, but you have to think in terms of the EPA's safe drinking water standards. So obviously, even if it's at 300 or above and it's 500, that's still considered safe drinking water. What I want to do is be able to give you something other than just the status quo or the baseline or the basic what's considered safe. And I want to help you to protect your immune system. And in order to do that, we need to really bring the CFU counts of that bacteria down to as low as possible. And that's where I come from, the economy of medical grade water treatment in medical clinics and dental clinics and those kind of things. But I want to extend that level of performance to everyday people who live at home and also who work in an office in their place of business to protect that water as well. There are things that you can do that are very cost effective that can solve these issues and reach these goals to be at goal, not be under goal. Okay. So let's discuss what's not included in the bacteria test, because you need to be aware that not all tests can cover everything in a single test. So the first one is going to be E. coli, and that's the Escherichia coli, abbreviated as E. coli, is bacteria that's found in the environment, also in foods and in the intestines of people and animals, particularly warm-blooded animals. E. coli are large and are a diverse group of bacteria, and while most strains of E. coli are harmless, others can make you sick. Obviously, we've seen it in the headlines of certain foods, for example, or even like meats. Some kinds of E. coli can also cause diarrhea, and while others can cause urinary tract infections, or UTIs as we know them, respiratory illness and pneumonia, and other illnesses. So while a lot of it is out there, and you may become exposed to it, depending on your immune system and how strong it is from a day-to-day basis will determine if you become susceptible to it or not. And by the way, this source is straight from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, also known as cdc.gov. The most basic test for bacterial contamination of a water supply is the test for total coliform bacteria. So that's different than E. coli, and that's also different than HPC. Let's talk about the total coliforms. They include bacteria that are found in the soil, in water that has been influenced by surface water, and in human or animal waste. And if you remember through some of my teachings, I've talked about where you could have exposure to pesticides, for example, if you had a sprinkler system, and if you didn't have the vacuum breaker that creates an anti-siphon protection system, that could actually be on where the lowest sprinkler is in your yard, for example, like those pop-out sprinklers. And when it's not working or in use in service, it goes back down periscope, so to speak. So it's at ground level. And now you have some sort of monsoon torrential rain after you've been applying pesticides. And so the residual effect of those pesticides can run off into that water sprinkler system at the lowest point, right? Because gravity takes it downwards. If you didn't have a vacuum breaker, it could get into the source water supply that is the internal plumbing system. And now everybody's exposed to these pesticides, which are toxic and carcinogenic in nature. But also, you can pick up some bacteria from the fecal matter of pets in the area, in that lawn. You could also pick up bird droppings, which are a huge problem for Giardia. I actually had one of my dogs, wasn't even drinking the water that was out there, but the water that was damp and muddy, just the pads of their paws was able to pull in the Giardia and get into their system. And my puppy was absolutely sick for weeks. And finally, we got the diagnosis. We thought that it was just typical puppy stuff, but our puppy got a strain of Giardia where we had lots of birds that were attracted and would land in our lawn because it was just full of earthworms, and so they just came over by the droves. And they do what birds do. Food comes in, waste goes out, simple math, right? Coliform and E. coli are two separate tests that you need to be aware of so that you can get those tests in addition to the HPC test, which is the one that I'm recommending that you do for home because it goes after a different type of source of bacteria. So you can see here we have total coliforms, as I mentioned, but you could also have fecal coliforms. And remember when I talked about back siphonage and water mains breaking and taking the water that was supplied into the home, and now there may be a break even in sewer lines and water mains, and they become cross-contaminated. So there's always a potential for this. So I want to cover something that's not too nerdy, but two terms that you should learn are point of use and point of entry in terms of water treatment. And I'll cover those now. So point of use connects directly to a specific location. It has less initial costs to create a remedy for water treatment, but they do become more expensive over time. Now, point of entry connects directly near the incoming water supply in the home or the building, the place of business, to treat all water taps. Now, there's greater complexity because it has to be plumbed in, and it's usually at a higher initial expense, but cheaper to run and maintain over the long run. And the best example that I can give you in a real world scenario, you know that you can get into a fairly inexpensive printing solution by having inkjet printers, for example, versus a laser printer. But here's where I'm going with that. The cost per page is significantly different. You will always have a high-priced 45, 50 cent, maybe even $1 cost per page with an inkjet printer versus having a color laser printer, which might be pennies in cost per page. And so when you think about point of use, I want you to think about the low price point lure, and you get hooked with that, but then you find, oh my gosh, I'm trying to print a flyer or maybe a brochure or something, and now you have to go spend $100 or more to get all of the colors that you need. And then how many of those are you going to be able to print and get it out to people? Because maybe you have a meeting in your home, maybe you have some sort of study or something, and a group of people come over for that. That's going to be more expensive, way more expensive. And if you just understand that concept on the front end, and you know that a laser printer is a little bit of money up front, but it probably pays for itself the first 90 days that you own it. That's what I want you to take away from here. So when you think about point of entry and taking care of a water treatment, depending on the role of the whole house filtration system that you choose, it's always going to be way cheaper if you have access to the water source. Now, if you're renting, that might not be something that you have access to or have permission to investigate as a solution. If you own the property or you have access to the property that you're renting and you have the approval of the landlord in that situation, then that opens up a world of options that takes care of all of the taps, all of the interior plumbing, whether it be in the kitchen or the bathroom and everywhere in between. And it's all the internal plumbing. It has nothing to do with the sprinkler system or any other water that gets plumbed for outdoor use. So that's what you needed to understand about this. And let me just give you some quick examples to put this in illustration for you. So if you read what the types are, there's 3 columns here. You have a type of a particular appliance, and then you have point of use, or POU, and then you have point of entry, POE. Now let's look at the first row. Underneath those 3 columns, you'll see that I listed filter water container. So everybody knows about the Brita filters, and maybe you've heard of some others that remove all the TDS in their water. Not a big fan of that at all, by the way, because I go into that in greater detail in my books as well as in my teachings. But if you have a filtered water container and you like to fill it up at the faucet and then transport it over to your refrigerator for chilled water that has been filtered to remove the aesthetic complaints that most people would have, taste, color, and odor, that is considered a point of use appliance. Okay. If you look down below that, now reverse osmosis comes in several different means. There's ultrafiltration, there's above the sink or on counter reverse osmosis, where you bring a system over and you hook it to the kitchen faucet, and then it produces water by the gallon, right? Or you have a more permanent fixture. And let me back up by saying the one that's on the counter is still considered point of use, right? But the point of entry version of a reverse osmosis is one that has been plumbed into the system for the plumbing and has a separate tap. That under sink reverse osmosis system is considered point of entry. Another example of that would be a whole home water filtration system. It gets plumbed in as the water comes into the home and begins to remove water contaminants and sediment and things like that, depending on the role of the whole house or whole business water filtration system. And then the last example I'll give you here on this page is a shower filter. So say that, your hair and your skin has been dried out and maybe your hair's turning green. I remember my hair would get kind of greenish in color because of the summertime when school's out in a hot desert. One of the ways we would cool off is the community pool. Now, I always left that pool with red eyes because of the level of chlorine that was in the water that they had to do to offset people's behaviors of peeing in the pool or worse. That's just what they have to do in terms of community health. But that's also the reason why if there's an outdoor shower, whether it's at the beach or if it's at a pool, you should always pre-shower in that to rinse off any sweat and body oils and salts that might be accumulating to keep the chemistry right in the pool. But also after being in the pool, you want to rinse off that chlorinated water as soon as possible out of your hair and off of your skin. And then, of course, you can always take a regular shower once you're in the men's area or the women's area. Know that the shower filter is designed to remove that chlorine out of the water so that you not have skin irritation or your hair is damaged by the higher levels of chlorinated water. Remember, I talked about it being a double-edged sword. Shower filters are designed for that. Some shower filters do more than that, and they treat the water differently to try to adjust the pH in the water to a more alkaline state. Not sure about how I feel about people spending money trying to have a higher pH of water unless they just fantasize about being in some island or someplace where there's a waterfall and it's been running through the rock in the mountains and trying to capture that. For drinking purposes, I am on board about that. I think that if the water is treated properly, externally speaking, I think that that's going to be a bigger benefit for you than trying to adjust the pH of the water in terms externally for your skin and hair. Let's move on. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save this piece. We're going to cut this video short here, and we'll come back to the second part of this training since we've just went long. See you in the next video.